people think I was interviewed by the 9/11 Commission. I know why I wasn't, because they didn't want me on the record. In fact, I was told later that what I provided in the joint 9/11 inquiry was so classified it couldn't be in the classified report. What does that tell you? They covered up. They helped cover up for NSA. My supervisor, the director of the Signals Intelligence Directorate, says 9/11 is a gift to NSA. We're going to get all the money we want and then some. And that's certainly what happened. Congress has opened it up. They opened up the coffers and just started pumping even more billions. What do you do? This is a moment of truth for me. I was already incredibly alarmed. I'm already gone to the most senior people at that time. I've already gone to the Office of General Counsel. I've already confronted the director of Signals, the Signals Intelligence. Mm-hmm. In that moment, as I got off the phone with that attorney, I said, I cannot remain silent. If I remain silent, I am complicit in the subversion of the Constitution. I took an oath, support, and defend for basically my entire military career, government career.
Right.
I'm not going to let the government violate the Constitution. You can have both. This thing about it's black or white, liberty or security. You actually can have both at the same time and compromise neither. Mm-hmm. There's that famous Benjamin Franklin quote.
Right. Security for
For
freedom.
those who, yes, you can sell both. Mm-hmm. They aired, and even Hayden himself admitted, we drew that line. He always used sports.
What was it? What is the exact? He's like, when you trade your freedoms for securities, you have
a little bit. Those who seek a little will lose both. Basically, lose both.
Right.
Yeah, a little liberty for security will lose both. Mm-hmm. There's a larger quote around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In that moment, I knew I could remain silent, but I knew by not remaining silent, I would put myself at extraordinary risk. I'm a senior executive. I had taken the oath.
Sure, yeah.
I have a fundamental responsibility.
But you decided to go about doing it
all through channels.
Through the correct legal way it should be done.
Yes. So I'm going to accelerate this because then how was I punished? Right. And this is where life literally was turned upside down for me, because even then I was being tagged as a troublemaker. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I decided to blow the whistle. I went to the Inspector General. I then went secretly, which was allowed under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, an actual act of Congress.
Right. I
could go, at the time, they modified it later. I could go directly to the intelligence committee's oversight, both HPSI and SISI. I'm just, without expanding it, but it's the secret. I could go to them to share my concerns in private. Now, there's a risk that I could be exposed. It turns out every channel that I went to, all the official channels were exposure channels. So I'm disclosing, but I'm being exposed at the same time. You could argue in part the intelligence communities were already co-opted, owned by the intelligence community. In large part. Right. They're beholden. Remember, it's secret, right? Yeah. You go to a secret chamber, even in the Capitol, right?
So you went to these proper secret channels.
Then I was subpoenaed, equivalent of being subpoenaed, prima facie testimony, evidence, material evidence and testimony to 2 9/11 congressional investigations. One was Saxby Chambliss. They had been a recently formed Homeland Security, provide all kinds of information to them, which was basically the precursor to the joint 9/11 joint inquiry. Both of the committees.
Okay. Wow.
All of that was suppressed. No one to this day can find my testimony or the highly classified information I gave them.
Really?
And I didn't keep it at home. And I didn't secret it away.
Right.
I didn't hide it somewhere in a basket or in a pumpkin.
Right.
So I can laugh about it now. Okay. But so that's spring, fall, or summer. I was not part. People think I was interviewed by the 9/11 Commission. I know why I wasn't, because they didn't want me on the record. But no one can find. In fact, I was told later that what I provided in the joint 9/11 inquiry was so classified it couldn't be in the classified report. What does that tell you? They covered up. They helped cover up for NSA. NSA had a lot of egg on its face. Now it's,
and some of the stuff that you said, you still can't even say today.
Not the classified stuff.
Right, not the classified stuff, right.
But they were at the heart of the failure. There gets into great detail because this is what happened. So I couldn't put any of these programs, and the ones I was telling you about, including ThinThread and a bunch of others, weren't allowed to go operational because they were continuing to spend. They were, in fact, oh no, I was sitting in a meeting and my supervisor, the director of the Signals Intelligence Directorate, says, 9/11 is a gift to NSA. We're going to get all the money we want and then some. And that's certainly what happened. Congress just opened it up. They opened up the coffers and just started pumping even more billions.
Who said 9/11 was a gift to NSA?
My supervisor, the Signals Intelligence Director. It was just it's now this haunting quote sitting right next to her where she says 9/11 is a gift to NSA. I was in a meeting. We were going around together because as part of I led the communications part of my leadership and communications team. We're going around to the workforce because they needed to be held. People are just really taking this hard. I encouraged her to go around, not just to console, but to be seen and explain, what are we going to do? And she's sitting in this meeting, this one particular meeting saying, I'm just sitting there with my where she says 9/11 is a gift to NSA, we'll get all the money we want and then some.
Christ, man.
Because they're always, we never got enough money. If we just had enough money, we could, no, it's not about the money. And you'd already solved the core challenge problems already. So I then was part of the thing about this Department of Defense Inspector General. My other colleagues, I was anonymous because I was still working. They were all retired, including Diane Rourke, who was the staffer on the House Permanent Select Committee. She had the primary NSA account, Republican primary NSA account. I had made secret connections with her to give her a heads up on what the heck was going on at NSA early on, okay, after 9/11.
Okay.
But remember, then I was in formal, right, with investigators. In fact, under 9/11, they were so hyper about. See, NSA wanted to put childminders along with me. They wanted to know exactly what I was going to share. The investigators, to their credit, said no. So, but I was spirited down to basically a secret. It was a nondescript government building where I was then interviewed in this building. I wasn't interviewed like at NSA or for the joint inquiry.
Right.
They were because that's what was happening. All this pushback. Because it was exposing a lot of embarrassing details about how the entire intelligence community had failed to prevent. And all Congress said, how do we stop this again? How do we prevent another 9/11? That was a big thing. How do we prevent another 9/11? So I was part of this DOD Inspector General investigation. Went on for a while. I was the primary source. Thousands of pages, corruption, the fraud, the billions in waste, the ThinThread versus Trailblazer, ThinThread versus Stellar Wind, which was obviously super classified. At that time, and it had been for several years, as it turns out, right? That went on for a while. I was flagged and tagged left and right. All kinds of retaliation, reprisal started occurring. I started getting shifted. That's how I ended up at the National Defense University, out of sight, out of mind. We accelerate to November of 2005. I make a fateful decision. And by the way, as a side note right now, this is about the furthest and longest I've ever publicly said how all this transpired. There's a lot more behind what I said in terms of details and fascinating human dynamics, right? But I've never really gone this far, right? Because most interviews don't last very long.
Right, right.
So here it is, November 2005. I decided I had one last chance to make my case to the new director of NSA, Keith Alexander, who actually was much more technologically savvy. He did not take kindly to my blowing the whistle. I sent him a letter. Caused quite a stir. But the last thing, Trailblazer, they had decided Trailblazer, it got canceled in 2006.
Okay.
But he was convinced that he could do it better. And there was a follow-on program called Turbulence, all these T programs. Yeah, T programs. See, this is the kicker for me. I'm just on a kind of a weird masculine level.
Yeah.
We had the T at NSA. The T in NSA had already been fully demonstrated, okay? But low T is what they focused on.
Right.
As much as they projected high T, I've never said this before, it was low T for sure. Look, if you take on and you solve the problem, that has its own reward. It's not about spending money. You want to make sure you create and deploy systems that actually provide for the common defense.
Yep.
So he didn't like it. Shortly thereafter, middle of December, this above the fold, old school print newspaper, New York Times, Eric Lichtblau, James Risen, publishes for the first time a exposure of this warrantless wiretapping program that had been in existence just after 9/11. Now, there was a huge scramble in the entire intelligence community, but particularly the NSA. They went apoplectic. Bush, there's public statements. You go on the internet, you'll see public statements from Cheney and Bush and a bunch of others about, oh my gosh, they just blew. It was one of the most secret programs.
Yeah.
Is one of the most secret programs in history in modern America.
What year did this come out?
This was December 2005. Still out there.
Okay.
The article itself.
And
there was updates to it.
When did Snowden blow the whistle? Or
2013.
2013. Oh, that was
way later.
Wow.
Okay. Remember, I've been following all the developments internally. The program was rapidly metastasizing, even before it got out in public. Remember, I'm going through channels. I'm spending lots of time in front of investigators, sharing with them what I know.
Right.
At great risk.
Yes.
Extraordinarily risk. I was already. So, article comes out. 2 weeks later, a massive national security leak investigation is launched by the DOJ. I knew, even when the article came out a couple weeks earlier, in December 2005, that I would be immediately targeted. Right. Because so few people do. In fact, this program was so secret that the only authorizing document was a memo, that was stored in David Addington's safe, chief of staff / attorney for Cheney, in his office safe.
Wow.
Even NSA sent their own attorneys down to get the authorization because they were so worried they wouldn't have cover. You always look at what's the cover. You want a lawful order. You get into lawful orders. I know that from the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Right. You only have to follow lawful orders. Nuremberg trials principle.
Yep. Which
was their excuse. We're just following orders. No, lawful orders. It wasn't lawful to break the Constitution. And there's lawful means to update the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But national security just had this huge carve out, like this huge exemption. Remember, exigent conditions, but now it's like permanent.
Right.
We're now in 2005. So accelerate forward. I knew that I became a target, a person of interest and a target as of spring 2006. Back up just a couple of months. I wrestled with this for quite a while after my last email with the director of NSA. There was one last route I could go, but it wasn't authorized. I grew up in an era when I became intimately familiar, until I met him later, but intimately familiar in terms of the history, Daniel Ellsberg. Pentagon Papers.
Pentagon Papers, yeah.
Yes. He went through channels. No one would listen to him in terms of the bright and shining light of Vietnam, a whole nother story. He was part of the study that showed it was, but it was buried, it was classified. Not all of them, there was stuff in there that was quite secret that he didn't release to the press. He ultimately went to the press, unauthorized, ended up facing 115 years because of government malpractice. The judge threw the case out. Mm-hmm. I was there wrapped, a young teenager, right?
Danny Sheehan. Big part of that.
So I had one last route. I could touch the third rail, go to the press. At NSA, if you go to the press without authorization, and I knew what it was like if you have to have something published. I had something published in based on my work I did on Jackpot in IEEE Computer Magazine in 1996, when I was doing all my really highly technical stuff, I had to go through the whole with a classification review officer just to make sure it was good.
Yep.
It took months.
Right.
Here, I'm going to go to the press without any authorization. But at that time, it only violated administrative policy. It didn't violate the Constitution. It was not a crime. It wasn't criminal to go to the press. However, I knew if I did, I could end up just like Ellsberg. I already knew that. Some people thought I was stupid and naive and didn't know that. That's not true at all. I knew exactly what the risks were. I knew not only could I lose my job, probably would, but worse, I could be charged on the espionage. I knew that. So how do you go to the press where they're at? And this is, I wouldn't even get into all this. Part of it is still technically classified.
Yeah. What wasn't the NSA spying on the press?
Yes. They had a special program as part of this larger, it's called First Fruits.
First Fruits.
Where they were monitoring certain media outlets and even individual reporters and journalists because they were so scared that something would come out, not just about the secret surveillance program, but the torture program.
Right.
Torture program came out way before this one did. Okay. Abu Ghraib.
Yep.
Yeah. Cy Hirsch. Right.
Right.
My Lai, that's where he became famous as a journalist. So I had that choice, and I won't go all the details, but I had one chance to make contact with a reporter, which worked, and ended up anonymously communicating with the reporter for about a year before I knew that I would ultimately have to go face to face. And so I actually, through 2007, I was having infrequent, aperiodic face-to-face meetings with this reporter at even greater risk. Because as things progressed, I was under extraordinary electronic surveillance. I knew they'd eventually catch up with me. I knew that I might find myself being, pulled out of my house or having my house raided or my office down at the National Defense University. And that's exactly what happened.